Troy's record.
If you and I walk into a bank, pull out a weapon, and demand $1 million, we'll spend the next 20 years of our lives rotting inside a concrete cage. The world will call us criminals, the law will show no mercy, but if you want to completely destroy a multi-billion-dollar global empire, wipe out 30,000 jobs overnight, and permanently erase an entire piece of childhood history from the face of the earth, they don't put you in prison. You get a multi-million-dollar bonus and a standing ovation on Wall Street. Over the last decade, we have watched a strange, quiet execution take place. Some of the most profitable, nostalgic, and deep-rooted brands on the planet, companies that defined American culture, have completely disintegrated. Whenever the mainstream media reports on these catastrophic collapses, they always feed you the exact same lazy, predictable excuse. They tell you that Toys R Us simply couldn't compete in the modern digital age. They tell you Amazon was simply too fast and simply too efficient.
Despite the destruction they caused, executives whined and cried that Amazon was to blame.
As for Red Lobster, well, the media all came up with the same narrative. Normal, everyday customers were too greedy. The all-you-can-eat endless shrimp promotion that you loved, well, it single-handedly dragged the iconic casual dining company into the ground. They want you to believe that these companies just grew old and these companies all died of natural causes. But you see, my friend, that is a complete lie. These corporate giants did not collapse because of market trends. They did not die because of a shrimp promotion. They were systematically targeted. They were destroyed from the inside, and they were deliberately liquidated by a shadow network of financial architects who operate completely in the dark. Welcome to the dark world of private equity.
Wow, that's a lot of shrimp.
At Red Lobster, enjoy 30 shrimp for just $10.99.
I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid.
You just said the magic words and look what you did.
Toys R Us.
The world's biggest toy store.
Toys R Us.
Over the next few minutes, we are going to strip away the corporate jargon and look directly into the mechanics of a terrifying financial weapon known as a leveraged buyout.
This is the big-time PE playbook. Washington has done very little to rein in these firms or to ensure that their incentives align with the best interests of our economy.
We'll uncover how a small group of billionaires legally strip-mined the physical land right out of underneath Red Lobster. We'll expose the dark secret of the modern world of unchecked capitalism. The people who buy these iconic brands are not trying to save them. In fact, they are making a lot of money by making sure these companies collapse. To truly understand how a multi-billion-dollar empire is broken apart, you first have to understand the weapon used to cause the destruction. If we look back into the dark history of organized crime, the Mafia used to run a highly specific, devastating scam they called the bust out. The play was simple. A mob syndicate would buy a stake in a successful, legitimate local restaurant, sometimes through extortion, sometimes through gambling debts. If the restaurant had a flawless reputation and an incredible credit line with suppliers, the mobsters would be excited. You see, these mobsters didn't care about cooking food. Instead, they used the restaurant's near-perfect credit to order a massive, unprecedented amount of expensive inventory, premium steaks, high-end alcohol, luxury kitchen equipment. But you see, the moment these goods arrive at the loading dock, the mobsters would quietly slip them out the back door, selling them on the black markets for pure, tax-free cash. They lined up their pockets with those millions of dollars. They never paid the suppliers, and when the credit lines were completely maxed out and the business was buried under unpayable bills, they corporate stamped it as a dead company, burnt the building to the ground, and collected the insurance money. So what you have now is The restaurant has been destroyed, the suppliers were ruined, but as for the mobsters, they walked away filthy rich. Now, if you do this whole operation in a leather jacket in the back alleys of New York, you go to federal prison for racketeering. But if you wear a three-piece Italian suit, hold a degree from Harvard Business School, and do it from a penthouse on Wall Street, it's called a leveraged buyout. And guess what? It is completely 100% legal. Let's take a look at the absolute brilliance and absolute malice of this financial trap. In the mid-2000s, a group of powerful private equity firms looked across the American landscape and saw a massive and incredibly profitable target, Toys R Us. It was a company bringing in billions of dollars, holding zero major debt, and more importantly, carrying a brand name trusted by generations of Americans. These Wall Street firms decided they wanted to buy it. But here is the first major revelation. Wall Street firms almost never use their own money to buy a company. Instead, they go to massive global investment banks and borrow billions of dollars to fund these purchases. Now, normally, if you take out a massive loan to buy a house or a car, you are responsible for paying the loan back. But if you fail, the bank takes your assets. Private equity operates under a different set of rules. The very second the deal closes, the private equity firm executes a very smart legal strategy. They transfer the entire multi-billion-dollar bank loan off of their own books and strap it directly into the balance sheet of the company they just bought. Think about how insane that actually is. Walking into a bank, taking out a massive mortgage to buy a luxury mansion, moving in, and then legally forcing the mansion itself to pay off the mortgage for you. If the mansion can't find the cash, it gets demolished, while you walk away with your bank account completely untouched. This is the foundation of a leveraged buyout. The target company pays for its own capture.
Let's go back there. Oh, hey, look, red camera.
Look, red camera.
Over here.
To see the human cost of this whole operation, let's take a look at a store manager. We'll call him Andrew. Andrew isn't a Wall Street analyst. He doesn't understand complex debt instruments. What Andrew does know, though, is how to run a toy store. He has worked for Toys R Us for 25 years. The specific location is highly profitable. The shelves are immaculate.
They're really cute. Like this one is really cute. This one, I would get as a present for one of my friends.
His staff is well trained. Every weekend, his parking lot is packed with families. Andrew's store is making millions. The moment a leveraged buyout is finalized, Andrew's world quietly starts to rot. Suddenly, a strange memo arrives from headquarters. Andrew is told his operation budget is cut by 40%. The store's air conditioner breaks during the height of summer, but HQ says there's no money to fix it. Next, he's ordered to lay off half of his full-time employees, leaving his remaining workers exhausted and stressed. Then, the shelves start to go empty. Not because children are buying the toys, but because major toy manufacturers like Hasbro and Lego are suddenly refusing to ship their newest products to the stores. And why, you ask? Because behind the scenes, the toy manufacturers can see the corporate financial ledger. They know the truth. They see that Toys R Us is suddenly drowning. When the private equity funds took over, they loaded this incredibly profitable toy chain with over $5.3 billion of debt. Suddenly, a toy store that used to spend its cash on upgrading its locations, hiring workers, and innovating its website was forced to pay over $400 million every single year just to pay off the interest on the bank loan private equity used to buy them. Think about that number. $400 million a year vanished into thin air, sent directly to Wall Street banks for a loan the toy store never asked for and never needed. But it gets worse. While Andrew is watching his store fall apart, the private equity owners start charging the bleeding company hundreds of millions of dollars in advisory fees. They forced the toy store to pay them for the privilege of being managed to the ground. They were draining the company alive. They were strip mining the cash flow. Toys R Us wasn't losing a war against Amazon. It was being starved to death by its own parents. If you think what they did to Toys R Us was brutal, we have to look at the absolute pinnacle of corporate asset liquidation, the execution of Red Lobster. In 2024, when Red Lobster filed for bankruptcy and suddenly padlocked the doors of dozens of restaurants across America, the corporate PR machine went into overdrive.
Well, new tonight, Red Lobster has filed for bankruptcy. The restaurant says it had to settle more than $1 billion in debt.
Red Lobster has filed for bankruptcy.
Well, we may have hit it too hard.
Okay.
Endless Shrimp Fest may have finally taken its toll on Red Lobster.
They told the public a very funny story, honestly. They blamed everything on the corporate decision to make the $20 endless shrimp promotion a permanent part of the menu. They claimed the hungry, greedy customers ate the company into an $11 million loss, completely destroying the business.
And that there is this effort to blame kind of financial mismanagement on the public, as opposed to talking about the CEOs actually being held responsible for driving these companies into the ground. And in this case, the story is, oh, these fat, rude idiots just keep eating all the endless shrimp, not realizing that they should have some self-restraint.
Anyone who understands knows that an $11 million operational loss does not bankrupt a global restaurant chain that has hundreds of locations. The real autopsy of this entire scheme begins exactly 10 years earlier. In 2014, a massive private equity firm named Golden Gate Capital acquired Red Lobster through a $2.1 billion leveraged buyout. Now, when Golden Gate looked at Red Lobster, they didn't see a seafood restaurant. They didn't care about the menu, the employees, nor the customers. They saw something way more valuable. Red Lobster wasn't just a restaurant chain. It sat on what I would classify a literal gold mine. Over the company's decades of successful operation, the company had purchased and completely owned the physical land, the real estate beneath hundreds of its restaurant locations. Golden Gate didn't want to sell seafood. They wanted the land. The moment the acquisition was finalized, the private equity firm executed a devastating financial maneuver known as a sale-leaseback without consulting the restaurant managers nor the public.
The problem stemmed from the acquisition of Red Lobster by a private equity firm, Golden Gate Capital. The firm financed the sale in part by selling the real estate underlying 500 restaurants to a third-party real estate firm.
And there goes your local mall and all the stores you grew up with. Don't believe me? Just look at the numbers. Companies bought by private equity firms are 10 times more likely to go bankrupt than those that aren't.
Loaded up with debt because the private equity owners are only interested in a short-term flip.
They took the physical real estate of over 500 Red Lobster locations and sold it off to real estate investment trust for a staggering $1.5 billion in pure cash. They used the $1.5 billion cash to immediately pay back the bank loans they used to buy the company in the first place. In a single day, the private equity firm wiped out their own financial risk. But look at what this did to Red Lobster. Suddenly, Red Lobster no longer owned the land under its restaurants. The company went from owning its properties free and clear to being legally forced to pay high and heavily inflated monthly rent on the exact buildings they had occupied for 40 years. The private equity firms created a massive multi-million-dollar structural expense out of thin air, solely to line up their own pockets and de-risk their investment. The math was entirely unsustainable. Every single month, restaurants that were operationally profitable were bleeding dry just to pay rent to a third party. By the time Golden Gate exited the investment, they had secured their profits, left the company buried under a mountain of new rent liabilities and hundreds of millions in debt, passing a hollowed out, suffocating shell of a brand onto the next unfortunate buyer. The endless shrimp didn't kill the lobster. Corporate parasites did. If this was about toy stores and seafood, it would be a tragedy, but it would be a contained tragedy. The terrifying reality is that the shadow architecture has quietly infiltrated every single cornerstone of the modern world. Private equity firms have injected hundreds of billions of dollars into the basic infrastructure of human survival. They are quietly buying up regional hospital systems. The moment they take control, they apply the same exact brutal math. They load the hospital with leveraged debt, sell off the physical emergency room real estate, force medical facilities to cut essential nursing staff and life-saving equipment just to make interest payments to Wall Street. They are rolling up local veterinary clinics, neighborhood dental offices, and buying up thousands of single-family homes, transforming the American dream into a permanent rental trap. The exact model never changes. Load the asset with debt, drain the cash flow, walk away before it collapses. Think back to Andrew, the 30,000 retail workers who lost everything when Toys R Us finally snapped in 2018.
And we're not at risk of bankruptcy because our name's not on the loan. Toys R Us's name is on the loan. So then they say, well, we want to make big money. And you know what? Why would we do that? We could just rent land. So what we're going to do is we're going to sign for Toys R Us to sell all of the land under every store they own in the United States.
Dedicated employees who spent 30 years of their lives building that brand were laid off with $0 in severance pay. Their pensions were threatened. Their livelihoods were erased in a single afternoon. But just days before the company officially declared bankruptcy, the top corporate executives lined up their pockets with millions of dollars in bonuses for themselves. The regular working-class families got the wreckage, the architects got the gold. Private equity firms thrive in the shadows because they rely on complexity to hide their brutality. They know when the beloved brand dies, the public will blame the internet, change, rather than reading the corporate debt ledgers. They want you to look at the victims. They never want you to look at the designers. But the leveraged buyout is just one single weapon in the arsenal of the global elite. If you think the private equity firms are ruthless, you haven't seen what they have done to your healthcare and your ability to ever buy a house in your life. Depending on when you see this video, click the video on your screen right now to see what they did to your healthcare. If the video has been published already, that is. I'll see you there.